Hello, welcome to the Cash Game Locks podcast. I'm Big Italy 42 here, trying to help you build some cash game lineups. Obviously, it's earlier in the day, no lineups out yet, so you got to build your tentative lineups and make adjustments accordingly. So tonight's going to be a really interesting night because obviously you have a game in Coors Field. The game in Coors Field has a monster total, as always. You got a 10.5 run total there. You got a 9 run total in Boston. You also got some really low totals, a 6 run total in Washington. So it's going to be tough tonight. This is one of those nights where I'm generally a one lineup kind of guy, but this seems like one of those nights where you make one lineup with your top pitcher and you mix in some hitters, and then you will maybe make a second lineup with your mid-range pitcher and mix in some big bats with it. So I'm going to try to give you both scenarios. DraftKings, obviously, you have to have two, so I went with two different guys there. So I'm going to start off here, FanDuel. I went with a Coors exposure type of lineup here. And at pitcher, I think you have two options here in the middle. You got Taijuan Walker's a minus 180 favorite, 7.5 run total there in Seattle against Detroit, who's missing Miguel Cabrera. Walker's been phenomenal over the past month. Hasn't walked a batter in his last 4 starts. And he has a 30-0 strikeout to walk ratio during that time. And actually only 20 hits allowed during that time as well. And even right before those games, he went 8 innings in back-to-back games against Cleveland and New York. Has won 6 of his last starts, so 6 of his last 7. So he's option 1, and this is obviously going to be a powerful lineup. So if you're getting big bats from Coors, obviously they're expensive. You want some Dodgers as well. So Taijuan Walker is your first option. Brett Anderson, another interesting option. He's a minus 300 favorite. And that's the guy who's been up and down as far as strikeouts especially. Last 3 starts, 1, 10, and 7. But what you do like is he's gone 6, 7, and 7 in those starts, innings that is. Won 3 straight. Obviously gets a Philly team tonight that is pitching Chad Billingsley. And I and many others, Vegas, of course, agrees that Billingsley is going to get hit and hit hard by the Dodgers. Only a 7 run total here, but that minus 300 favorite tells you that Vegas is expecting almost all of that production to come from Dodgers. So if you want the safe win, Brett Anderson is the way to go there. 7,900, an enormous favorite. Catcher, I want some Coors exposure on the cheap. I went with Michael McHenry. He's $2,700. Obviously, you got to make sure that he's in the lineup first, but he's a guy who he's a better hitter than Nick Hundley, personally, I think, and he's just $400 cheaper, which is a significant discount on a night like tonight. Andrew Heaney has pitched well in his first 2 starts, but at the same time, he does get Coors Field tonight, so I think either one of these guys is a fine option. Nick Hundley, $400 more. I think if you're going up a little bit higher and paying a little bit more there, you've got some other options. You've got Yasmani Grandal, who I would prefer to Hundley at $3,000. So see who's in the lineup there. If you're paying up a little bit, like I said, I prefer Grandal to Nick Hundley. But at $2,700, I really like Michael McHenry here. First base options, there's a lot of them. In this lineup in particular, I went with Adrian Gonzalez. His price continues to drop, $2,900. Hasn't had a multi-hit game in his last 7, but each of his last 3 hits have been home runs. So Chad Billingsley, just not very good. Hasn't faced a whole lot of left-handed batters yet this season. He's only faced 43, but 19 of them got hits, and 11 of them came back around to score. So this is a guy who gets killed by left-handed batters. He's not supposed to do too well against righties tonight either. So Adrian Gonzalez, your option there. Some pivots for you. David Ortiz, I mentioned that 9 run total. He gets Dan Herron. He's been hitting the ball pretty well recently. $3,200 for him, a little bit more expensive. Obviously, you'd love to get Albert Pujols, but at $4,800, it's going to be really tough with some of these other guys here. So those are mostly the guys I'm looking at there. Second base, I'm going with Johnny Giavotella. I assume he's going to be leading off here, $2,900. Get some cheap Coors exposure. Second base, not a particularly great position if you ask me. Giavotella's got 3 multi-hit games in his last 4. Extra base hits and multiple RBIs in 2 straight. $2,900, he just makes a lot of sense. Other guys around that price, Ben Zobrist at $33,000. Cesar Hernandez at $3,200 if you're not playing Brett Anderson is an interesting option. Or Howie Kendrick if you want to go with Dodgers instead of Coors Field exposure. He's $3,000. He's a fine option as well. Third base, Josh Donaldson at $4,100. He gets a lefty. Jose Quintana is a decent lefty. Not a guy that I'm going out of my way to necessarily pick on. But only a 19.9% strikeout rate. Doesn't give up a lot of home runs, but neither does Chris Sale. And Josh Donaldson took him deep. So Josh Donaldson destroys left-handed pitching. He's a guy that I'll be targeting quite a bit at $4,100. A great price tag for him tonight. A lot of viable options outside of him. You get Nolan Arenado if you have an extra $1,000, which good luck finding that. But he's 51. You got to like him at home against the lefty. Chris Bryant, 600 cheaper, 35. He is a great cash game option against Tim Cooney tonight. So take your pick there. I'll be paying up at third base as much as I can. So really those are the three guys I'm trying to get in my lineup at third base. Your one other option you feel okay about, Justin Turner, $3,400. But I think all three of those guys in such great spots that Turner is kind of an afterthought for me because he's really not a discount at all. Shortstop, you're going to need Troy Tulowitzki. He's at home against the lefty. He's great at home. He's great against lefties. You know this story here. Finally starting to hit more like the Troy Tulowitzki we all know and love and cannot fade at $4,400. So he's a guy, he'll be in all my cash game lineups tonight. I see really, really hard to fade him. And there's not a lot of other great options. A guy like Carlos Correa's been hitting. You're not considering him in your cash games tonight because he's facing off against Corey Kluber. It's a great tournament option, but for me, it's going to be Tulowitzki. The only other guy I'd consider paying around that price, Jose Reyes is $900 cheaper if you have to have the salary savings. He gets Jose Quintana, like I said, a solid pitcher, but Toronto does still destroy lefties. Jose Reyes in play as well. Outfield options, I'm just going to start off with the cheap guy. Andre Ethier, $2,300. He's near min salary, gets Chad Billingsley, should be batting 6th, maybe 7th tonight, hopefully 6th. I mean, it's going to be really hard to fade him in my cash games, and I think a lot of people are going to have him once again. And, you know, he's been having a productive season for the most part. Last night, 2 hits, had a double, walked, RBI. I mean, he's a guy that, $2,300, he's not going to hurt you much because he doesn't cost much, and he's going to be pretty popular. So he's a guy you're going to need some exposure to. Jock Peterson, once again, $3,300. Popular last night, once again, Dodgers. This is where you got to make your decisions because at $3,300, he's really cheap for his upside, especially in this matchup. But there are some other options. You got Nelson Cruz at the same price against Kyle Ryan. He's a fine play. Yasiel Puig, if you want to go him instead of Peterson at $3,200. But Peterson's going to be a popular play again. Gerardo Parra, guy I've been loving to play recently, but he gets lefty-lefty. Just not a big fan of that. And his price up a little bit from last night as well. And then my last guy here, one of the hottest hitters on the planet over the last couple games. 6 hits, 2 doubles, 2 home runs, 10 RBIs, 5 runs scored in his last 3, all in Texas. Cole Calhoun now goes into Coors Field. You want to get Mike Trout here, but he's really expensive at $5,600. I think Cole Calhoun, a nice cheap way to get yourself some more exposure there. Pair him up with Giavotella, McHenry, and Tulo. You get 4 pieces of Coors Field. Solid favorite there, whether you went with Walker or with Brett Anderson. I think all those guys are fine plays as well. Other guys around his price that you like, Brett Gardner, of course, but he gets Sonny Gray as a tough matchup. The Colorado outfield, I mean, you got Blackmon and Gonzalez, both lefties. Neither one horrible against lefties, but just with their inflated price tags, just not guys I'm really going out of my way to force into my lineups tonight. All right, moving over to pitcher and cash game lineup on DraftKings. Starting off here, I want Corey Kluber. He's $3,000 less than Max Scherzer. I should specify that Max Scherzer, obviously lowest total, minus 146 favorite. Not the biggest favorite, but I mean, he's the best pitcher tonight. It's just really tough to fit him, especially DraftKings at $3,000. That's a lot for your lineup. So I'm going Corey Kluber with as my first pitcher. Second one, Taijuan Walker at $8,200. He's $3,000 cheaper than Kluber as well. And I already kind of went through him. He's a guy that I'm a big fan of. Catcher, for me, really, you got 2 options right here at this price. Once again, Michael McHenry, $32. You can get Yasmani Grandal at $33. Take your pick there. If you want to pick on Coors Field, if you want to pick on Billingsley, I think both ways are fine ways to go. First base, once again, went with David Ortiz. You've got other options here. He's $4,200. There's a couple other guys around that price you feel okay about. If you're not playing Walker, Victor Martinez at $4,000, a fine play. Adrian Gonzalez, you can go down to him at $3,800. He's a great play as well. So, I mean, take your pick there. I kind of just put this in here to mix it up, but I think Ortiz and Gonzalez are probably going to be your chalk plays at first base. Get one of those 2 guys in. Second base, once again, it's Johnny Giavotella, $3,400. He's just way too cheap. I'm hoping he's leading off, and he should be today. There are some other options. If you wanted to go really cheap, Jeff Baker, $2,600, gets Wade Miley. We know he's great against lefties. You could always bump down Ortiz and Giavotella to Jeff Baker and Adrian Gonzalez in this lineup, which I'll finish here in a minute, of course. But then you've got yourself $1,500 more you can spend elsewhere. So keep that in mind as you go through this lineup. certainly some other options. You could bump those two guys down and then bump up the next guy. I have Danny Valencia at third base. He's 3,500, but if you make those two changes I mentioned, Gonzalez and Baker, you can move him up to Nolan Arenado or Chris Bryant. Both those guys at 4,800. I think those guys are fine plays as well. Same goes for Manny Machado. Got a big price bump. It was $3,900. Maybe it was a birthday gift for him. He got his birthday homer. His price jumped quite a bit, so I think he's another viable option. Matt Carpenter, another guy you can really consider at $3,900. He's in a great spot as well against the rookie and Beeler. But outside of that, I'm really not paying down at third base. I think there's a lot of good options. Valencia, the only guy I consider, but really, like I said, trying to get one of those other big guys. I prefer them. Just trying to give you some options here as you're building yours. And shortstop, no question here. It's Troy Tulowitzki. He's only $4,800, which seems expensive, but when you consider his upside, you consider where his price has been in the past in a situation like this, you got to play Troy Tulowitzki in your cash games tonight. Don't see any way around it. Obviously, with two more expensive pitchers that I played and a couple of big bats, I had to pay up for some people. I went with Cole Calhoun. I want Mike Trout, of course, like I said on FanDuel, but Trout's $6,200. Really tough to fit him. If you can fit him, that's the guy you want, of course, but going to be tough tonight. So Cole Calhoun at 51, got him in there. Jock Peterson, still just way too cheap at $3,700. I'm a big fan there. Got him in. And I had to go with a cheap guy here. Like I mentioned, you can mix some things around there in that middle infield and upgrade. But Chris Parmelee at $2,400, I think by far the best punt option in the outfield, sub 3K. $2,400, he hasn't been great recently. Obviously, make sure he's in the lineup before you just go sliding him in there. He has had a couple days off recently. Not as nearly as hot as he was when he first came up, but a guy who could still produce, hit the ball hard, going against a contact pitcher tonight in Kyle Gibson. So I think if you have to get some salary savings, I think he's the way for you to go tonight. And that's going to wrap things up. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. If you got any questions for me, I'm at BigItaly42 on Twitter as well. Check out all of our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com. We've got an optimizer named Colossus. It's a great way to build some tournament lineups, cash game lineups, whatever you'd like there. We've got cheat sheets, a lot of things to help you win tonight and every other night. So check all that out at dailyfantasycafe.com.